Words of Sri Aurobindo from the book The Mother, from the collective works of Sri Aurobindo, volume 32, page 201, topic The Mother's Force, subtopic Becoming Conscious of the Mother's Force. Question: Yesterday I felt a great peace and power. I felt the mother's atmosphere around me and strange nearness to her. I thought that the mother's thought or the consciousness must be with me. Is this true? For this, Sri Aurobindo says, the force is always around you, for the mother has put her consciousness there, but it works with the special force when we think of you. That is what you feel. Your consciousness of it, what you describe of your feeling about it, is quite correct. It to become clearly conscious in all parts of the being takes time. 6 July 1933. Question: X told me that he does not feel it is the mother's force that works in him, since with his own force he is able to lift 40 kgs of grain at a time. For this, Sri Aurobindo says, what is meant by one's own force? All force is cosmic, and the individual is merely an instrument. A certain amount of force may be stored in him, but that does not make it his own. There are certain possibilities in the way of the experience. First, there is a faith or sometimes a mental realization, and this of itself is enough to make one open to the mother's force so that it is always available at the need or call. Even if one does not feel the force coming, yet the results are there and visible. The next is when one feels oneself like an instrument and is aware of the energy using it. A third is the contact with the power above and its descent, spontaneous or through a call into the body. This is the more concrete way of having it, for one physically feels the force working in one. Finally, there is a state of awareness of close contact with the mother inwardly, which brings a similar result. Question: What I have to see is that my consciousness supports the working of the mother's force in me. For example, if my being constantly supported the mother's work, there would hardly be any halt in the sadhana due to the tamas in me. The tamasic inertia would get transformed into peace without rising up and darkening the other parts of the being. For this, Sri Aurobindo says, yes, that is how it should happen. But it is difficult so long as the inner being is not conscious and receptive at all times and in all conditions, and it is difficult and it takes time to establish such a condition. Date 27th Jan 1935. Next subtopic: Descent of the Mother's Force. Sri Aurobindo says, what you feel streaming down must be the mother's overhead force. It flows usually from above the head and works at first in the mind centers, that is the head and the neck, and afterwards goes down into the chest and heart and then through the movements of the whole body. It is the effect of this working which you must be feeling in the head up to the shoulders. The force that comes down from above is the one that works to transform the consciousness into that of a higher spiritual being. Before that, the mother's force works in the psychic, mental, vital, and physical plane itself to support, purify, and psychically change the consciousness. When you began to meditate, you saw the mother's face. That is very good. It means that there is an inner connection established. The absence of the smile does not mean that she is displeased or that you have done anything against her will. At the same time, the mother's force descended on you. It was the pressure of her force that you felt on the head and your breast, Everybody feels in the beginning this pressure, and what you felt in the breast was the working of the force. And in the yoga, these are the signs of the action of the yoga, and you must observe quietly what happens without getting disturbed, remembering the Divine Mother always and trusting in her actions upon you. Date 25th June 1932. When there is an obscurity, this is the next question. When there is obscurity or habitual thoughts, the narrowness of the physical mind becomes prominent. But now and then, the physical mind seems to be becoming limitless, thoughtless, and without obscurity. Is this a true feeling? For this, Sri Aurobindo says yes. All the paths that have to be changed must widen like that before the higher consciousness and can descend into them. Question: is there any relation between the mother's descent into the physical paths and the descent of the forces that are working in me? For the Sri Aurobindo says certainly. In a sense, the descent of the higher force is the mother's own descent, for it is she who comes down in them. 21st December 1933. Question: as I sat to pray, I felt an electric force pass through my spinal cord. It was like the electricity from a battery passing through from the crown of my head down to the end of my backbone. The more it went downward, the more strong and joyous was the rapture I felt. What is this? For this, Sri Aurobindo says, it is the descent of the mother's force from the above thought, the spinal cord. It is a well known moment. These are three kinds of descent. One is this touching the base of the centers, which rest on the spinal cord. Another is through the head into the body, going from level to level till the whole body is filled and opens all the centers of your consciousness. Another is the descent enveloping your complete self from outside. Question: last night I felt that the mother's force, instead of descending from through the head as usual, came down directly through the forehead center. For the Sri Aurobindo says, it can come in from anywhere, but the normal way of the descent is through the head. Sri Aurobindo says, when the peace is established, this higher or the divine force from above can descend and work in us. It descends usually first into the head and liberates the inner head or the inner mind centers, and then into the heart center and liberates fully the psychic and the emotional being, then into the navel and other vital centers and liberates the inner vital, then into the Muladhara and below and liberates the inner physical being. It works at the same time for perfection as well as liberation. It takes up the whole nature part by part and deals with it, rejecting what has to be rejected, sublimating what has to be sublimated, creating what has to be created. It integrates, harmonizes, establishes a new rhythm in the nature. It can bring down too a higher and yet higher force and range of the higher nature until, if that be the aim of the sadhana, it becomes possible to bring down the supramental force and existence. All this is prepared, assisted, fathered by the work of the psychic being in the heart center. The more it is open, the front and the active, the quicker, safer, easier working of the force can be seen. The more love and bhakti and surrender grows in the heart, the more rapid and perfect becomes the evolution of the sadhana. For the descent and transformation imply at the same time an increase in contact and union with the divine. This is the fundamental rationale of the sadhana. It will be evident that the two most important things here are the opening of the heart center and the opening of the mind centers to all that is behind and above. For the heart opens to the psychic being and the mind centers open to a higher consciousness. And the nexus between the psychic and the higher consciousness is the principal means of the Siddhi. The first opening is effected by a concentration in the heart, a call to the divine to manifest within us, and through the psychic to take up and leave the whole nature. Aspiration, prayer, bhakti, love, surrender are the main supports of this sadhana, accompanied by a rejection of all that stands in the way of what we aspire for. The second opening is effected by a concentration of the consciousness in the head, afterwards above it, and an aspiration, call, a sustained will for the descent of the divine peace, power, light, knowledge, ananda into the being, the peace first or the peace and the force together. Some indeed receive lights first or ananda first or some sudden downpouring of knowledge. With some of this, there is a first opening which reveals to them a vast, infinite silence, force, light, bliss, or above them, and afterwards either they descend or they ascend to these things, begin to descend into their lower nature. With others, there is either the descent first into the head and then to the heart, then to the navel and below, and through the whole body, or else an inexplicable opening without any sense of descent of any of the light, peace, wideness, or power, or else an horizontal opening into the cosmic consciousness, or in a suddenly widened mind an outburst of knowledge. Whatever comes has to be welcome, for there is no absolute rule. But if the peace has not come first, care must be taken not to swell oneself into exaltation or lose the balance. The capital moment, however, is when the divine force or the Shakti, the power of the mother, comes down, takes hold, for then the organization of the consciousness begins and the larger foundation of the yoga. 11 September 1934, these are the words of our Lord Shri Aurobindo.